Welcome back to Westeros.org's YouTube channel. As you can see, I'm back home and the library is behind me once more. And today, of course, I will be reviewing episode 5, Eastwatch, an episode that features many returns and reunion, as well as quite a few spectacular dragon effects. If you're a book reader and you're concerned about spoilers, I would say that there are two revelations in this episode that you might possibly see as spoilerish if you buy into what they're saying. I think the first one is quite dubious and the second one extremely dubious. Before I go into the review itself, I'll also note that some of the, because people are moving so quickly between locations at this point, it is a little difficult to get a good flow when I'm dividing it by area. So we'll see if I have to rework that for the last two reviews of the season. But for now, I'll stick with this and hopefully it won't be too confusing. We'll start off on a battlefield outside of King's Landing, where we see a sight that I bet no one would have expected after last week's cliffhanger. It's Bronn and Jaime and they're alive. Somehow they've survived, being dragged downriver, being underwater for God knows how long. And Bronn, well, he has some armor on and Jaime has full-on armor and that golden hand. But no, Bronn pulls him out of the water and they are just fine. How did this happen? Don't ask seems to be the message, basically. It's completely implausible, and definitely this is one of those, we wanted it to happen, so it made sense to us. That's the only explanation. There isn't anything else, and it's bloody stupid. Better is when we see the battlefield itself, when we see Tyrion walking across the charred ruins of men, horses, wagons. It's a powerful image, really dramatic. And then when we see the prisoners being herded up to Dany and Drogon on a little hill, well, the dragon effects are spectacular and Drogon just looks amazing. I just want to take him home and, well, maybe not cuddle him, but, he's really awesome. Then Dany opens her mouth and starts talking about the bloody wheel again. She's not Cersei, she's not here to kill everyone, she's here to break the wheel. Really, Dany. I mean, yes, she is a bit better overall in this scene, the whole bit when she is judging Dickon and Randall. That's an easy one to flip around. She judges them to, die because they won't kneel, and she has them incinerated with Drogon. She's pretty intimidating through that. That works for me. But the fact that they have to bring up this bloody wheel again, just a couple of episodes ago, she was talking about how the Iron Throne is hers by right and she's here to sit on it. How is that breaking any wheel? Because the wheel is apparently supposed to be something to do with the great houses replacing each other at the top of the food chain and nothing changes for the people under them. And I think maybe it's supposed to have started with the Targaryens sort of uniting the Seven Kingdoms, and she wants to sit on that Iron Throne. So either she's here to create an anarcho-syndicalist commune, like one of those in Monty Python, where you're going to be wallowing around in mud and saying that lobbing scimitars at people isn't a valid form of government, or she's here to sit on the Iron Throne and she's not going to be breaking a bloody wheel doing that. I don't understand what they're doing with this, but I guess they needed something for her to put into the speech, basically. Next up we have Dragonstone, where we see Dany returning on Drogon after doing a bit of burninating over on that battlefield. And Jon is waiting for them out on a windy cliff, and Drogon majestically flies down and decides to check out Jon. I guess this is sort of like when, you've met a girl and you kind of like her, and now she's checking to see if her pet dog likes you, to sort of get approval. And it seems that Dany is a bit uncertain about this, because she's kind of craning her neck around, trying to look around Drogon to see whether he's snacking on Jon or not. Fortunately, he doesn't take a big bite out of Jon. And this is another one of those scenes where Jon, looking kind of perplexed and surprised, works really well, because that expression that he has on his face is pretty good in the face of a massive dragon landing in front of you and deciding to sniff you. Others aren't quite so happy in this scene. Oh, I forgot, of course, we have a Jorah reunion as well. He returns, of course, after being all fixed up, and he's so happy and healthy now, so he has no fears about giving Dany a big old hug. So he's happy at least to be back, and Dany's happy to have him back, even though she's also got Jon there that she's eyeing and everything. Varys and Tyrion, on the other hand, they are not so happy. They're sitting together commiserating about Varys having served Aerys and now thinking that maybe Dany's gonna turn out to be a mad queen after all. And Varys, of course, is so concerned for everyone. He's a really nice guy who'd never do anything ruthless or anything like that. So, it's all for the people and being concerned about everyone. So, of course, he doesn't want to serve a despot again. A better reunion, or rather first meeting actually, is when Gendry later on shows up on Dragonstone and gets introduced to Jon. That scene is a little bit cute, but it kind of works anyway with them sort of talking about their fathers and Jon saying that Gendry is leaner than Robert, and Gendry responding that, Jon's a bit shorter than Ned, and it works out all right. Gendry's a very different character than when we last saw him, but he has been gone for quite some time. It's just that he's really on board with this whole, I'm going to be part of this fight now, and I'm not sure where he got this conviction from, but I guess he picked it up somewhere in King's Landing. And speaking of King's Landing and of Gendry, we first see Gendry, of course, in this episode when Davos goes to King's Landing together with Tyrion. Tyrion, of course, was there to meet in secret with Jaime, whereas Davos apparently seems to have felt that he owed it to Gendry to go and pick him up. I'm not quite sure why. His idea is to take Gendry from there and then put him up in the north in a smithy. Given that they're not exactly attacking King's Landing right now, that won't make him much safer. That will put him closer to the threat. But I guess it's fortunate given that Gendry did want to be along on the fighting. And of course, when Davos first goes into that smithy and talks to Gendry, we get a rowing joke. Yes, it's cute, it's funny as a meme. I don't know that memes should be on the TV show. It's not really the place for it. And the whole bit in King's Landing feels kind of extended. Yes, we haven't seen him for a while, but why spend so much time on it when we are rushing through everything else this season? Also in King's Landing, of course, we get a couple of meetings between Jaime and Cersei. Cersei doesn't seem to be too well, she's concerned about them having lost all these men, but Jaime's talk about how, they're really in trouble doesn't really impress on her. She just figures they'll, get some more mercenaries and fight it because they can't exactly surrender. And she's probably right in that Dany isn't exactly going to have a lot of mercy for her. And then, of course, it turns out that Cersei has another concern that might make her interested in having some negotiations going after all. She's pregnant! And Jaime's so happy that he will get to be the baby daddy in public this time, that he gets all smoochy with Cersei and not really concerned about the fact that she goes on about don't betray me, don't do this, don't do that, and she's generally rather unhinged. But no, he's still all with her. The sex must be absolutely fabulous. Twincest for the win, I guess. So, yeah. Still not too happy with that situation. In Winterfell, we have another cool scene when Bran decides to use his abilities to look through a flock of ravens and see where the Night King and his army are hanging out. And it turns out that a mass of them are apparently heading for Eastwatch. So there needs to be a bunch of ravens sent out, and elsewhere in the episode we see that those ravens appeared really, really fast at their destinations, as usual. That is not the big problem with anything connected to Winterfell. The big problem with Winterfell this episode is Arya. First, we have her getting really upset at Sansa when Sansa apparently isn't defending Jon enough against the lords. Who are a little upset that they, he's left them, and they're wondering why they picked him and not Sansa, which might be a good question actually. It's particularly funny when the Knights of the Vale decide to speak up for the fact that they came there for Sansa. They said nothing when Jon was being picked as king. And Arya, of course, she made the choice at the crossroads to go home rather than to pursue vengeance and be a faceless girl or whatever she's supposed to be. No, she was supposed to come home and protect her family and reunite with her family, but she's sure giving Sansa a hard time. Not much of those warm, fuzzy feelings that she had when she first met her. She's trying to be weirdly intimidating towards her and talking about, oh, you always like nice things when she's in their parents' bedroom. Like, yeah, you just waiting to take over here, aren't you? You untrustworthy little thing. It's bizarre, and obviously it's another one of those, now that they don't have Jon there to set up false tension between Jon and Sansa, let's set up some false tension, because I'm pretty damn sure it's false tension, between Sansa and Arya. Well, that's not the only thing that's topsy-turvy in Winterfell, of course, because Arya has apparently lost all ability to be sensible and sneaky, so Littlefinger managed to set her up. Basically, he gets his letter from Luwin and then hides it in his room and watches as she goes off and finds it all planted for her. Yeah, all right. I don't know what to make of it, but the way that Arya is acting with Sansa and the way that she's acting in general is it's all over the place. It's whatever they want it to be from scene to scene, and it sucks. Nothing in this episode can be quite as bad as the Citadel sections, however. It's pretty amazing. They've kind of raced past King's Landing and gotten even worse, which is quite an achievement. It starts off with Sam walking into a meeting of maesters where they are discussing what to do about the message from Winterfell. And Sam, of course, tries to tell them about the threat from the north and how they need to send word to everyone and get everyone behind this. Everyone who knows anything about fantasy cliches knows that they're not going to listen to him, and of course they don't. The only nice thing about this section is the fact that they do a bit of name dropping. We get a mention of Jenny of Oldstones. Not strictly sure I would call her a charlatan though. And we also get a mention of Lodos. So there's your little history of Westeros things coming in here again. Other than that, it's pretty dire, and it gets worse when Gilly and Sam are doing a bit of researching together, or going through whatever transcription he's supposed to do, and I guess she's just reading along and helping. And she finds out that there's this High Septon's diary, and it mentions that this High Septon has annulled a marriage for Prince Rhaegar and remarried him to someone else. Sam, of course, misses this entirely because he's ranting about how they have him doing nothing important. But there are so many things wrong with this little revelation, and I will go into them in detail after sort of going over the section by section, because it deserves a real proper rant. And then Sam, decides that he's had enough of just reading about Betterment's achievements, so he decides to grab some books. No doubt one of those important scrolls will randomly be among them, and then leaves the Citadel. We do at least get a nice final shot of the High Tower. That looks really impressive. And I'm really glad to see the last of the Citadel, but of course the problem with the Citadel was Sam, so unfortunately we haven't seen the last of him or Gilly. So I'm betting it's going to get even more dire. The episode wraps up with everyone who should be at Eastwatch reaching Eastwatch, and there are more reunions and also a few people realizing that they have connections, like, oh, there's a Mormont here and here's a Wildling, and they have a little chat about that, and Gendry, of course, gets to meet the Brotherhood again, and there's a bit of tension put on display until Jon gets them to realize that everyone is on the same side because they're still breathing. Nice sentiment there, isn't it? And then they all head out into the wilderness in a very epic shot of, snow and vast emptiness. And there's a lot of those IKEA furs on display as the grim gang goes out to face whatever lies beyond the wall this time and to try and capture a white to take back home. Time for the final conclusions and the judgment on this episode. I counted 6 eye rolls, but bear in mind, one of those is a massive, full 360 degrees, several times eye roll for the Citadel, especially for the annulment part. That was horrible. The best thing about this episode was undoubtedly the effects. The dragon, Bran's vision, all that jazz. The worst would be Arya and of course Gilly's discovery. And I'm going to give you more on that, trust me. Like I said at the beginning, there were 2 things that could be considered spoilery for book readers. And those are the ones I'm going to dig into at the end here, which also coincides nicely with the rant that needs to be done. The first doesn't really need a rant, however. That's the question of, is Cersei pregnant in the books? I'm not going to go into detail for all these sort of pros and against of this, but I don't really think so. Too much time has passed for it to be plausible, is I believe the conclusion we reached last time we looked at it. I don't rule it out entirely. It is possible. I'm not quite sure what point it's going to play except possibly saving her from execution in that case. So it's possible, but I don't think Jaime's going to be around to be the happy baby daddy, at least. And the next one, of course, is the question of, did Rhaegar annul his marriage to Elia and marry Lyanna? No, I really don't bloody think so. First of all, if we just look at the context of Gilly discovering this, why is there a High Septon's diary in the Citadel? Are they supposed to send in all their keep diaries and send those in so that people can discover these things? Why would the High Septon even write something like that in a diary and send it anywhere? And by the way, the High Septon should not have a name. The High Septon abandons his name when he becomes High Septon. It is not used anymore. How they tell them apart? Well, they probably say the High Septon during such and such a period. So no, there should be no High Septon Maynard's diary anywhere. So it's just implausible that this information would exist in the first place and be in the Citadel and be written down. But then the question, of course, still remains, I mean, this could just be their way of putting the information forward, right? Well, it could be, but it is completely implausible as well that there would be an annulment. Now, maybe I should start at the other end a little briefly and say that I don't think it's implausible at all that Rhaegar married Lyanna, because we do have evidence of bigamy among the Targaryens. But why would he at first go and annul his marriage to Elia? There is no need for it. And in fact, it would make his prior children illegitimate if he basically tries to say the marriage never existed for some reason. That's basically the route you're going to have to do with a consummated marriage, that it was wrong from the beginning, and they're not related, so I'm not sure what, there's no consanguinity rules or whatever that word is. He's not going to be able to pull that one. So how would he get annulment, and then how would he not have his children with Elia be illegitimate, which doesn't work very well with the dragon has 3 heads, which they haven't mentioned. So yeah, fine, they can go ahead with that. But in the books, no, it makes no sense. I think, in fact, that we are gonna put together a separate video on this topic to talk a little bit about annulments in Westeros and why it doesn't make sense for this sort of setup and why they might be looking to have it. I have a few thoughts on why they would feel that a legitimate Jon is somehow necessary. I don't think they're good thoughts. And, well, I don't think their idea is a good idea in any way, but it may just be as simple as them wanting to introduce yet more tension for some reason. But we'll see. I want to dig into that a little bit further, and for that one I will have Elio along with me, because yes, he is aware of this incredibly stupid development. That one's a little hard to avoid, and certainly takes the cake so far this season, I think, for incredibly stupid choices. But who knows, maybe they'll top it next week. We don't actually yet know what that episode is going to be called, but until then, and we'll see what I'll make of that.